So welcome to the Meaningful Jobs podcast. My name is Adrian, and today it's my great honor to welcome my guest Peter, who runs a restaurant brand, to my podcast to share about his views on career and how to find meaning in work. So first of all, how are you, Peter? Hope you're well.
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Yeah, very good, thank you.
Good.
So before asking you maybe perhaps how you managed to navigate through the COVID times during your business. Could you maybe tell us a little bit about your background, like how you got into the restaurant business?
Yeah, so I'm actually fourth generation restaurateur.
Wow.
So I had but my father started this particular restaurant, or both my parents did actually, and they had and then I kind of worked in it, but I worked for my father since I was 12 years old.
Right.
I didn't want to have anything to do with restaurants. Like I want to have nothing to
Wow.
do with it, and became a lawyer. Went to law
Okay.
school,
Yeah.
became a lawyer, and I was practicing law. And one day, and I was in my office, and there was a conversation being taken place next door, and it wasn't a bad conversation. I don't
Yeah.
even remember what it was about, and it was just so boring. And I just remember thinking, I don't want to have that conversation in 10 years.
Hmm.
And I was working, even while I was working for the law firm, I'd still work part-time at the restaurants at night, just and those I'd get energized, et cetera. And so I said, you know what, I want to kind of come back. So I talked to my father about coming back. And
Right.
what I didn't know was that he was looking for somebody to buy the restaurant,
Right.
and like he was
Right.
wanting to retire, and so I agreed to come back and started from there, took over the operations in 2001, and then eventually bought the restaurant from him in 2009.
Right. Right. I see. Well, so that's quite a big shift actually, from
Yeah.
law to the restaurant to the restaurant business.
Well, we
Um,
get sued a lot, so it's really not that much of a shift.
right, right. So I think you've grown to quite a large scale already. I think you've got more than a few, is it a few dozen restaurants already? Or
We
oh,
have six restaurants, but we have other businesses that we operate. So we have a seasoning company as well. We have a company that we have an e-commerce site where we ship our food everywhere.
right,
We
right.
do a little bit of real estate development. We got a couple of companies doing that. I'm an author. I'm a speaker. I host my television show on Benevolent Faith TV called Constructive Christianity.
Yeah,
So we do a whole lot of different stuff, and that just goes outside of restaurants. But restaurants is probably what I'm most known for, because that's kind of really where I got our start, and that's kind of the more public face. It's kind of more of the front of mind of businesses that we have.
right. So what would you say is the most difficult aspect in, running a restaurant business?
It's always been people, regardless of whether it's your employees or whether it's your customers.
Yeah,
As long as I can remember, you're always going to have problem customers. You're always going to have problem employees. I mean,
yeah,
you have outstanding customers, outstanding employees too. But in reality, what usually kind of sucks the most time is that. And then I would say probably a really close second is the changing of government regulations. And because in the restaurant business we are under so many different regulatory agencies, whether it's the health
right.
department, Department of Labor, OSHA.
Yeah,
Then you have everybody, has the IRS, Department of Revenue, Alcoholic Beverage Commission. I mean, I can go on and on and on. And so they change regulations on a regular basis. And so, and then all of a sudden they show up with the new inspection, and you're just like, okay, yeah, we'll fix that, but we didn't know it was a problem.
yeah. We've
So
got no choice anyway.
right, yeah, exactly.
Because I know a lot of people who'd like to actually maybe run a restaurant, or maybe their dream is to maybe have their own cafe or small restaurant, but a lot of them might not know the amount of work that is required. So, amidst all, the busyness, and the time and effort spent in maybe adhering to different regulations, how do you still find maybe enjoyment in what you do?
You know, Again, that kind of goes down to the people side of it as well.
Mm.
Um, you know, I got into the restaurant. I went to law because I wanted to help people. That was the main reason why I went to law. And I
Right.
would study, famous civil rights attorneys, and yeah, and I would study people that just made a difference using their as a lawyer to
Yeah.
help different things. And I think that was one of the frustrating things who does not make a difference. And
Right.
I mean, you might impact a person's life, but that's over a course of a year, 2 years. And even then, they're probably unhappy with you, even if you win, because they didn't get the
Yeah.
feeling of satisfaction they thought they were going to get. Where in
Mm.
the restaurant, there again, going back to the people, we get to make a difference in people's lives that work for us. The people that work for us are many of them have they made some bad decisions in their life, or maybe their first job ever. And so that's generally the people that are there. So we have a lot of people that have gotten out of jail. We have a lot of people that are battling drug and alcohol problems. In fact, I just fired somebody actually at our office, which is really unusual. I fired someone 2 days ago
Yeah.
due to being drunk at work.
Oh,
And but our main goal even then was, look, we need to get you help. I want to find this. So we have a chaplain that we had the chaplain contact her the next day because she was too out of it to listen to it the same day. But we had that chaplain to come
mm.
and talk to her about and give her different options of places that she can go for outpatient rehab, et cetera. So even after we terminate people, we still make that impact.
Yeah.
And then the customers, realize people don't eat out because they're hungry. They
Mm.
eat out for the experience. I mean, a piece of bread and a piece of cheese can satisfy my hunger. I mean, I've made many meals out of trail mix,
Yeah.
and so it goes beyond that. And so we get to impact their lives because sometimes that's the only bright spot in people's days.
Right.
And we get to have that type of impact on them.
Mm. Well, I think it's a good point you made that when you talked about being a solicitor, where it's pretty hard to maybe quantify how much help you can actually give people. Do you think it's a bit easier to do that, in the restaurant business?
I think yes, but you have to be a little bit, your expectations have to be low with it. And the reason why I say that, in the business world, we expect to make an investment and we expect, great returns. I mean, you don't go into business to try to make little returns off of your investment. That's not what you're doing. It doesn't matter what business you're in.
Yep.
But because we're a high turnover industry, because we see a lot of people again that are making bad decisions, that were raised in homes that were really rough and hard homes.
Yeah.
My goal is we're there to make an impact in their lives, and just enough so that if we get to see it all the way through, that's great.
Yeah.
But most of the time, what we're trying to add to it so that hopefully someone else can take it to the next level.
Right.
So I look at it as like a big bucket, and my job is to add water into that bucket. And sometimes I get to add a tablespoon. Sometimes I add, a whole gallon into the bucket. I might be the last one to get the water to overflow, but most of the time I'm not. But if I can keep adding water to that bucket, and
Mm.
then if they leave us and go somewhere else, someone else might not have that opportunity. But if
Yeah.
someone else is going to add that gallon to it, it could overflow. But if I did nothing, then all they did was just fill the bucket halfway. And so that's a big part of how we kind of look at it and how we kind of look at what we do as success.
So in this podcast, there's quite a lot of people who actually, have a stable job, and some of them might actually want to venture out, to join a business or start their own business. How difficult would you say is it to maybe forget about your stable income and just go into business? Because it's very easy to think about, oh, I want to help other people, but then you also need to make ends meet. So, like, what kind of advice can you give in this respect?
Right. Well, to that point, I've heard, no margin, there's no mission.
Mm,
So you gotta have money coming to
that's a
that,
great
coming
saying.
to there. You have to be focused on that. But regardless of that, Yeah, I heard that there was a group of nuns that operated a hospital. That's where it came from. Or at least where I heard it from was
Right.
from that. But at the end of the day, yeah, it's scary. Because I'll be honest, I probably have failed in more businesses than I've succeeded.
Wow.
But each time we do it, we say, okay, this is what it is. We kind of weigh out the cost ahead of time,
Mm.
and say, okay, is this going to be worth it or not worth it? And we try. But you have to kind of go in with an expectation that you're going to exceed your plans. You got
Yeah.
to go into the expectation that you might fall short of your plans, and you have to kind of be prepared for both. But the preparation for both is not as much of the physical side, it's more of the emotional side. It's
Yeah.
when you're lying at 2 o'clock in the morning and you're like, I got so much business that I can't handle it, what am I going to do?
Yeah.
Or I'm about to fail, and what am I going to do? It's you have to have that type of strength, and you have to be able to trust that people are gonna that you're gonna make it through to the other side no matter what. But that is an extremely difficult part, and I would think that's probably the hardest part about starting your own business. The other
Mm.
parts of it, just you're gonna mess up. I mean, end of the day, you're gonna mess up. The question isn't when, the question isn't if, the question is when, and the question is it a type of mess up that you can recover from? And that's the part you can't sit there and think you're going to have it perfect. The perfect plan, in my first book I have a chapter called The Perfect Plan,
Yeah.
and we see how it just gets wiped away, it gets destroyed in that perfect plan. It just doesn't happen.
Yeah. Yeah. So, well, our listeners can maybe purchase your book, I guess, to further understand maybe how to like start, a business without, going into a business with the wrong mindset, I guess. So you also mentioned in one of your previous interviews, I believe, about how bad perhaps you were affected by COVID.
Yes.
Could you maybe talk us through how, what happened and how you managed to, navigate through it?
So I was at a speech. I was giving a speech one time, and I was talking about COVID and the problems with it. And there was a guy that came up, real country guy, who was giving a speech right after me, and he got up there and he looked at me and he said, "Running a restaurant during COVID is like a three-legged lizard with half a tail." And somebody gave me this as a reminder. It's a little
Right.
three-legged lizard with
Oh,
half a
wow.
tail, and I keep it on my
That's a
desk.
nice reminder.
And because that I mean that it was in Tennessee, the restrictions weren't too tough like they were in many other parts of the country or the world.
Mm.
Um, but the problem in Tennessee was our governor said every little county could make their own rules. So since we were in 4 different counties, um, so what I did in this store, I couldn't do in another one. So that was one part of it. But originally, when it started with you're not allowed to go to restaurants because if you go eat out at restaurants, you're all going to die. So I had to lay off like all my employees.
You
And
actually had to lay off every one of them,
pretty much, yeah. We were able to, consider we were still essential, we were able to keep some of our cooks,
Mm.
and I converted our servers into delivery drivers, and we tried to do a delivery business, and we were setting up different things that we had to do.
Yeah.
But like one of our locations that had normally around 100 employees, I mean, they were operating with a team of six.
Oh,
you know our busiest volume store had the most, and we were operating with a team of 25, and normally we had 150 employees. And and so and some you know and when you're having to do that, it is not only difficult, but then you just don't know if you're going to make it or not. I remember I wrote in my journal. I talked with our GMs and said, "Hey, there's this thing called COVID, and it's hit the
yeah.
United States,
Yeah.
and it might impact us. So just kind of be prepared. We might have to close for a couple of weeks. Just be prepared," because that's what they were telling us.
Yeah.
And then about a week after that, I remember writing in my journal, "They're shutting down everything. We
Yeah.
need to hang on. This is about to be a bumpy ride." And 2 days after that, I was on the phone with a bankruptcy attorney saying,
Oh,
"I
wow.
don't know if I'm going to make it." And I need, I need to make certain that whatever I do, that I don't screw up our bankruptcy if we have to file bankruptcy. Now, we never did.
Mm.
But I had to call our vendors and be like, hey, I don't have any cash.
Yeah,
I'm getting a little bit in through carry out. I will pay you eventually.
yeah.
But I'm just going to tell you right now, I'm going to be late. And I divided our checks up into three piles.
Mm.
The A pile was my food, government, and money. Those had to be paid first, or money, people, food,
Okay.
and government.
Yeah.
The C pile was everybody who was going to be hateful and said, "Well, you got to pay us right away."
Mm.
And I'm like, "No, no, actually, I'm not." And
Yeah,
then
as you
you move over to this pile because what are you going to do? The courts are closed. It's not like you could sue me for it anyway. And again, I knew eventually I was going to pay them.
can.
Then there was the B pile, and that was everybody else. So every day I'd kind of go through the checks and be like, okay, let me add a few B's into the pile. I could look at my cash and knock out all my cash, send those checks out.
I can't imagine how stressful that must be.
The thing about it is again, when I'd gone through the failed business before and recognized that God has you, and by placing trust in God,
Mm.
and recognize that any fear that you have
Mm.
is all you're saying is, hey God, I don't trust you in this moment. I mean, even David says in the Bible, he says, when I am afraid, I'll put my trust in you.
Yeah.
And so that was it. So every time we kind of start getting a little nervous, the same fears as everybody else, are you going to die if you get COVID? Or, is your friends and loved ones going to die? We had those same fears too. But I
Mm.
recognized, everything that was happening, the speed at which it came, it had to have been a spiritually based component. There's no way that anything like this could happen
Yeah.
just out of randomness of nature. And so we knew that's where it had to be. So we end up spending most of our time being thankful. So we put up blessing boards in our restaurants for those who are working, and and every day when we pray, we made certain that we were being thankful, and we would list the things that we were thankful for in order to be able to kind of get through that season. But it's not because I wanted to be. It's not like I was like, oh, this is just so awesome.
Yeah.
It's because I chose to be. And that's the part when you're going through these problems, that's the part you have to be. You have to choose your attitude. You can't control the circumstances, but you can control your effort and your attitude. Those are the only two things in life you can ever control.
So I guess perhaps, your way of trying to manage stress is to categorize between things where you can control and things where you can't, and just focus on, the things that you can, I guess.
Yeah, well, there's some of that, but control to me is kind of funny. I look at the way we think we control our lives in a similar way that when we took my son horseback riding one time,
Right.
and it was his first time when he was a little kid, first
Yeah.
time when he was by himself on a horse.
Right.
And we told him, on this horse, you got to let that animal know you're in control. I mean, it's a big, big animal and a little bitty boy, sitting on top of it. And you're like, you're in control of this animal, no matter what.
Mhm.
And so the horse at one point in time takes off in a trot.
Yeah.
And his legs come out of the stirrups and his arms are holding on the reins, and he's just flapping. I mean, everything's just flapping, and you hear him screaming,
Yeah.
I'm in control. I'm in control. And that's how we are in our lives when we think we have control. And reality is we don't have control, but we
Mm.
do get to choose and control our attitude about it. We do get to
Right.
control whether we're going to be thankful during those times. And
Mm.
some days it's hard. Some days it's really difficult when everything's crashing around you. It's
Yeah.
just hard to sit there and say, wow, I need to be thankful during this time. And that applies in my married life too. When my wife and I are fighting, I journal every day, and every day I write something positive, but I'll focus on her. And
Right.
within 3 days of me writing something positive, it's amazing that she always gets better. And it's
Mm.
not because she really gets better; it's because my attitude toward her changed. And
Mm.
so we have and I just find that by changing your attitude towards life, um, it just the Bible's correct. It gives you a peace that goes beyond understanding, and I can't necessarily explain it. So during COVID, we had already learned how to process that, and so yes, it was stressful, but I also knew that no matter what, God's going to put me somewhere else. And if COVID closed me, God has me. It's not going to be the end of anything. And yeah, I may not be able to take the vacation I want, or I may not be able to buy the car that I want. So
Mm.
what? If I died, I couldn't take the car with me, and those memories of the vacation are gone anyway.
Yeah.
So, it doesn't matter to me at all.
Well, so now that COVID has ended, would you say you guys are doing a lot better? Like how did you guys get out of like the whole mess?
No, actually, I would argue that it's worse, but our sales wise is better. Our cash, our financial thing is better. I mean,
Yeah.
we actually now have cash. We have cash reserves. We created better systems for it. So in that sense, things got a lot better.
Right.
Where it got worse was after COVID ended in 21,
Mm.
then you had to battle the supply chain problem, and you had to battle the labor shortage, and the government didn't want to talk about the fact that the supply chain was a result of the labor shortage.
Yeah.
Everyone kept, even like the news kept pointing to all the barges on California. And
Yeah.
reality was is we were short supplies of things that were manufactured right here in the United States. In fact, one of our major things that I could not get anymore is
Mm.
literally a 45-minute drive south of me, and I could not get it. So it had nothing to do with barges or anything like that. They didn't have the labor to manufacture the size of the cups I needed for it. And so, and again, again, all the answers in the Bible, just sometimes you don't always know it's there.
Yeah.
But I was reading in there, and I was reading in Genesis, and I got to Genesis 41. And in Genesis 41, Joseph tells Pharaoh, "Hey,
Mm.
you got 7 years of great times, and then 7 years of famine. So start
Yeah.
stockpiling." And I realized then that's what we needed to do. So I rented a bunch of storage units
Mm.
and stockpiled 4 weeks worth of supplies, all of our non-perishables, and
Right.
stored all of that. And it got us through our busy season. And we didn't run out of trash bags when many of our competitors did. I mean,
Right.
we didn't run out of saran wrap and soup cups, and so we were able to get through that season.
Mm.
But the labor market, again, we were having to shut down certain days because we didn't have the people.
Yeah.
And it's still a problem today. It's not near as a problem as in 21. 22 is slightly better. This year is slightly better than that. So we're seeing some change in it. Um, but it's still a battle. I gave a speech in Cookeville, Tennessee the other day. It was about 250 people,
Yeah.
and asked the question. I said, how many of you are experiencing labor problems?
Mm.
And if not every hand went up, it was really close to it. Like I didn't see anyone's hand not go up. So it is still a massive problem. And from the friends that I have internationally, I think it's a worldwide problem too.
It's funny because it seems like we are in sort of a recession, but the unemployment level is still pretty low. There's not enough labor. Like as you said, even in other parts of the country. And
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, and I don't understand. I don't always understand why on that. To me, there has to be something the way they've changed the definition of it.
yeah,
Government's notorious for changing
yeah,
definitions to make things fit.
yeah,
They changed the definition of vaccine to get the COVID vaccine passed. And I'm not like some conspiracy theorist with it or whatever. It's just what happened.
yeah.
Um, but they've changed the definition of, they changed the definition of autism a while back, and then all of a sudden you
I
had
think
this
they even
outbreak of
changed.
autism
I
among
think they even
kids.
changed the definition of
And
recession. I think.
yes, they did. Absolutely. You're absolutely right. I forgot about that one. That's even the best example there. They did that. So you can change the definition, but reality is we're still suffering the effects of it. So I do agree with you that we have some of these issues. But the other problem is we're now seeing, because when COVID happened, baby boomers were right at retirement age. So many of them retired, which then gave the opportunities to rise up from other people below. And
Yeah,
then that's when the population started to drop. And I think that's a big part of it. I
yeah,
think the government programs from COVID didn't help matters because it was real easy to kind of ride that wave for a little bit.
yeah.
And truthfully, when you're seeing, people that have massive amounts of drug addiction and homelessness, they're not being counted in that unemployment rolls,
Mm.
but they're also not working either. So it's not like so that I'm not really quite sure. And then lastly, and I haven't looked at this number in a while, but about 3 or 4 months ago, there was 10.6 million job openings, and there was 9.6 million unemployed.
Yeah,
And and
that's
and
a really
so
phenomenon.
yeah, so even if you filled everyone got employed, you still were short jobs.
Yeah.
So, but I'm not quite sure how all that's got contributed with it. I know at 18 we were struggling a little bit with labor,
Yeah.
but nothing like we're doing right now.
Mm. So, lastly, before we end, um, I'm just wondering if you can maybe give our viewers some advice in terms of, how they can find, meaning in work aside from maybe just monetary compensations.
Work is never work is service. And work is worship. When you actually read the word worship in ancient Hebrew, it actually meant work. And if
Mm,
we're working for money
mm,
and not for service and not for worship, then
mm.
it will always be meaningless, no matter what. And if you're only in it for the paycheck, you'll never be fulfilled.
Yeah.
In Haggai, in there, God says, "Hey, you know what? You're not fulfilled. You work, but your purses have holes in it. In other words, you got money and it's just going away. You can eat, but you're not full." He kind of references fulfillment. He says that's because you're not working on God's house.
Mm,
And nowadays, God's house is in us. It's the temple within us. And
yeah.
so from that, we have to realize that we got to work on that first. And
Mm,
that's where it starts. And then from there, everything else will seem to take place from that point in time. But there are many people out there who are satisfied with other things. So the question I would have, and it's more of a not really advice, but it's a question you need to challenge for everybody listening can challenge themselves on, which is this:
mm,
what are you going to be accomplished if you died today? What are you going to be remembered for? Because it's not going to be money that you have. What are you going to be remembered for? And whatever you want to be remembered for, start focusing on it and
mm,
start doing everything you possibly can for it. And you can do it in your existing job. You
yeah.
can say, wow, my job is just meaningless. I don't like it. I want to find a new job that has meaning. But whatever it is, but ask yourself that question, because if you're not making an impact in other people's lives around you,
Mm.
I don't mean to be rude or hateful when I say this, but you're just taking up space. But everybody has influence over somebody around them. So what are you going to be known for on that circle of influence you have, and focus on it. But you have to start with that question there, because most people I don't think actually understand and know that about themselves.
Mm. Well, thanks so much for your time today,
Appreciate it.
Peter.
Thank you.
Look forward to having you in our future podcast maybe.
It'd be great. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
All right, thank you, Peter. Thanks.
Thank you.